Activity 2 in Chapter 9. So from the keynote, it is, what we're looking at is using the overlap detection function to figure out if something that you're dragging has overlapped or sort of collided with something else on screen. The overlaps function is built into Drawn2Code, so I'll show you how to add it to your stack. What's not built in is actually how to use it. So the way we'll use it is we'll get into the code that handles the dragging, and as you're dragging it, we'll just continuously check for overlap. So to use the function, we'll just need to call it and to check the two things for overlap, and then do something that we want when the overlap occurs. So the example we did in class looks like this, which has a little target kind of thing with three circles, and then when the arrow overlaps it, I just toggle kind of the colors on the circle. So how would we go about doing something like that? So let's start with the circle. That seems to make the most sense. So it's a display object. If we want to match the one in the activity, I made it a red circle and then a white circle that was a little bit smaller in set, and then a third circle which was red at the center. So that's got to be small. Doesn't have to be perfect, but that white one looks like it needs to be a little bigger. Not too big. There we go. And I've added something. This is Drawn2Code 1.553. Now you can add a name to the display object. So I'm going to call the outer circle the outer ring. I'll call the middle one the middle ring, and I'll call the inner circle the how about the bullseye. So now you can see in the stack that there's a little more information about what exactly object 1, object 2, and object 3 are. Okay, then so we want to drag something. So I'm going to add a polygon and change it into a star. So I'm just following the example we did in class. So let's put the target into a display group. So I'll create a display group called target. That is not required at all, but then I'm going to put 3 rings into the target. So outer rings now part of the target. Middle rings now part of the target. And the bullseye finally is part of the target. And then I'm going to add the touch listener to the arrow. So I select the arrow and I hit add listener, and I want to add the touch listener, not the tap listener, the touch listener. That's what gives us the dragging. So we can save this, let's say, as chapter 9, activity 2. And let's just test it. So I'm going to save the code, launch it in the Corona simulator, and wait for it to run. So importantly, there's no overlap detection yet. What we should just see is the target and the arrow, and when it loads, we should be able to drag the arrow around anywhere we want to. And it's the smooth, nice dragging. You might notice that the arrow is behind the target. That's because it's after the display group, which pulls all the components forward into the group. So we could reorder it in the stack, or you could select the polygon and bring it to front. That would do the same thing, pull it to front, because that'll be done after the display group's put together. So no overlap detection. Okay, so how do we get the overlap detection? Again, to do that, we want to add the overlaps function to our stack. So it's in functions, and it's actually the first button, detect overlap. That will give us the function that we need. like all the functions by itself, it doesn't do anything. To get it to do something, we have to call it. So where do we want to check for overlap? Let's zoom in on our stack a little bit. And just look at it. So we've got the polygon attached to the touch listener, and when it is touched and moved, the touch handler is called, and this snippet, on my stack, that's object 7, this snippet is where the code is that is called as the arrow is being dragged around. So that's where we want to focus our effort. So with that selected, I'm going to pop it out so that we can see the code a little better. This is the snippet. There's a lot going on in here. This is just the default snippet that Drawn2Code writes for you that does the nice smooth, no jumping, dragging. Where we want to edit it is right in here. As the arrow is being moved, that's where we want to check and see, well, has it actually been moved into the target or not? So to do that, we'll use an if statement, and we're going to call the overlaps function. So just to write out the if statement, there's all the key components. Overlaps will determine if two things overlap, and if they do, it returns a true, which means any code inside the if statement will run, which is what we want. So we want to see if the two things are, one of them is the target. You could use any of the circles as well, and the other is the arrow. The arrow is object 4, so we could write this if object 4 and the target overlap, then let's just start out by saying overlap. That way we'll be able to watch as our console changes, we'll be able to look and see, is the overlap showing up? And then if it is, then we'll worry about changing the colors and making it, a little fancier. So, is it running? Hey, there we go. It is running, and if you watch, you'll see when you overlap it, we get lots more overlap down here showing up. All right, so far so good. The last step then is just to tweak it a little bit to get visually to happen what we want to happen. So heading back to the snippet, I do not have enough screen space, so I'm going to write in this here in this if statement, and instead of doing print overlap, I'm going to change some colors. So the example we did in class, I just toggled what was red to white and what was white to red. So there's 3 things we're changing: object 1, object 2, object 3. Those are the 3 rings. So we'll say set fill color on each of them. So let me just fill out the basic kind of framework for what we're doing, and then we'll think through the colors together. So we need to do this for all 3 of the parts of the target. And then the thing is, when it's not overlapping, we'll want to change them back. So that's where we'll use an else to change the colors back. So I'm going to copy these 3 statements down here. And what we've got now is an if-else statement in which when the 2 things are overlapping, we're going to make certain colors, the ring certain colors, and otherwise we'll put them back to the colors that they were. So just to peek at it, the colors were red, white, then red. So if that's the original colors, I'm going to put them down here as red, white. White is 1, 1, 1, or you could just say 1, and then red for the inner target. And then when they overlap, I'm going to switch it to white, and then red in the middle, and then back to white. And if it helps, you could add some comments here. Red, that's white. Sorry, I'm screwing it up. This is red. This is white. And this is white. If that helps. I don't know if that helped. Screwing it up didn't help, certainly. So let's save it. Let's run it. Let's see what it does. So this app is trying to detect and see if the arrow that's being dragged can overlap the target, when it overlaps the target, and when it does, we should get this cool effect where the target toggles its colors. All right, that is, let me pull the snippet back up. That is Activity 2, Chapter 9 in cross-platform mobile application development. And we just made Activity 2, which is on slide 13 of the Chapter 9 keynote.